The grand hall of Velmora Prime was silent. Not the silence of reverence or admiration, but the silence of shame. At the center of the enormous chamber, beneath the glowing crystalline dome, stood Princess Zyra, her three-fingered hands clenched into fists, her pale lavender skin contrasting against the dark ceremonial robes draped over her. She had known this moment was coming. She had dreaded it for years. The rulers of the Galzorith Dominion, her people, sat on their high thrones, their elongated skulls adorned with golden circlets that pulsed faintly with psychic energy. Their eyes, black and unfeeling, observed her with the cold detachment of judges about to pass a sentence. One by one, the suitors had stepped forward, only to reject her. "Unworthy," said the warlord from the Dracian clans, his deep voice vibrating through the air. "Flawed," whispered the diplomat from the Zyphar collective, his three eyes narrowing in disdain. "A disgrace," murmured the noble heir of the Veilrith dynasty, his words laced with pity. The final rejection echoed in the chamber. Zyra felt her chest tighten, but she refused to let them see her break. Her people had abandoned her long ago, she had stopped expecting mercy. The High Chancellor, an ancient being with silver-hued skin, rose from his throne. "It is decided," he declared. "Princess Zyra of House Velmora, unclaimed and unfit to continue the royal lineage, shall be exiled to the wastelands of Zenthra 9. There, she shall live out her remaining days in accordance with the laws of our ancestors." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Exile. A fate worse than death. Zenthra 9 was a barren, desolate moon, where only the most wretched of outcasts were sent, those too disgraceful to execute, yet too inconvenient to allow to exist among their kind. Zyra lifted her chin, forcing herself to remain composed. So, this was how it would end. Alone. Forgotten. Cast away like a broken tool. And then, he spoke. "I'll take her." The voice, deep and firm, did not belong to any alien. The chamber fell into stunned silence as all eyes turned toward the figure standing near the back of the hall. A human. The only human present in the hall. Captain Elias Carter of the Terran Explorer Corps, dressed in a black utility jacket and worn cargo pants, stood with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and the scar on his left cheek caught the dim glow of the floating lanterns. He repeated himself, louder this time. "I'll take her." The hall erupted into chaos. A human? Daring to claim royalty? An outcast princess was still of noble blood, even if she had been rejected. "You dare insult this council?" The High Chancellor's voice trembled with fury. Elias shrugged. "Not an insult. Just an offer. You said no one would take her." "Well, I will." The council members whispered among themselves, some furious, others simply bewildered. Zyra couldn't move. Of all the possible outcomes, this made the least sense. Why would a human, a species her people saw as primitive and unworthy, make such a claim? What did he gain from this? "You cannot be serious," one of the elders sneered. "A human is beneath even the lowest of our kind. He has no psychic link, no connection to the void stream. How could he possibly claim a member of the royal house?" Elias stepped forward. "Last I checked, I wasn't asking for your approval." His sharp blue eyes locked onto Zyra's. "The way I see it, she deserves better than exile on some wasteland moon." Zyra's breath hitched. No one, had ever spoken about her like that. Not even her own family. The High Chancellor raised a gnarled hand, and the psychic energy in the room thickened like an invisible force pressing down on everyone's chest. "You overstep your place, human." His voice held power, vibrating through the air like a distant storm. "Your offer is null and void. You have no authority here." Elias took another step forward. "I don't need authority. I just need her answer." Zyra's heart pounded in her chest. This was madness. Accepting his offer meant defying everything, the council, her people, her family's legacy. But exile was death. This was a chance. She opened her mouth to speak, when a burst of energy knocked Elias off his feet. The force sent him skidding across the floor, slamming into a pillar with a grunt of pain. Enough. The High Chancellor's eyes glowed with fury, his psychic powers lashing out in anger. This mockery ends now. Guards rushed forward, weapons raised. Elias groaned, pushing himself up onto one knee. His vision blurred for a second before he grinned, spitting a bit of blood onto the pristine marble floor. Guess that means, no deal, huh? Arrest him, the Chancellor ordered. Throw him into the dungeons. Let him rot for his insolence. Zyra's throat tightened. The guards grabbed Elias, forcing him to his feet. He didn't resist. He only turned his head slightly, casting her one last look. No fear. No regret. Just the faintest flicker of something else. And then, they dragged him away. The hall was silent once more. The High Chancellor turned toward Zyra. Your fate remains unchanged. You will be transported to Zenthra 9 at dawn. The words felt distant to her now, as if spoken in another reality. Because, for the first time in her life, someone had fought for her. And now, that someone was about to die for it. The cold stone walls of the Zenthra Citadel prison pulsed with dim bioluminescent veins, casting an eerie glow over the damp cell where Elias Carter sat, his back against the wall, wrists bound by phase cuffs that neutralized any movement beyond a slow crawl. The air was thick with the scent of damp metal and something distinctly alien, a scent he couldn't quite place, something wrong. His head still throbbed from the psychic blast that had sent him flying earlier, but he had suffered worse. Well, he muttered to himself, that went about as well as expected. The guards had thrown him into the deepest levels of the Citadel's detention complex, far away from anything resembling civilization. The Dominion's elite prisons weren't designed for criminals. They were designed for enemies of the state. And right now, Elias had somehow landed himself at the top of that list. For what? Offering to take a princess no one else wanted? Something wasn't right. Zyra had been rejected, humiliated, discarded, but when he had stepped forward, they had reacted as if he had insulted their very existence. The anger, the panic, it didn't make sense. Not unless, there was more to the story. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elias lifted his head as a familiar figure stopped outside the cell. A Dominion warden, one of the few creatures he actually recognized. A Veilrith enforcer, towering and clad in bioforged armor that clung to his skeletal form like living chitin. His 4 golden eyes studied Elias with a mix of contempt and curiosity. So, this is what becomes of the great Terran Explorer Corps, the warden said in a voice like grinding stone. Begging to claim an outcast like some desperate animal. Elias smirked. Not much of a beggar, am I? Considering I got my face slammed into the floor for my troubles. The Veilrith guard's mandibles clicked in amusement. You should have stayed quiet. Now you die here. Elias rolled his shoulders as much as the phase cuffs allowed. Don't suppose you'd consider letting me out? Maybe a friendly bribe? No? Ah well, worth a shot. The warden let out a sound that could have been laughter. You are bold, human. That much, I will give you. He leaned in slightly, voice lowering. But why? What did you hope to gain? Elias held his gaze. What if I said I just didn't like the way you treated her? The warden regarded him for a moment before shaking his head. Foolish. You don't know what you have stepped into. Then enlighten me, Elias pressed. The Veilritha's eyes glowed faintly, but then, he stepped away. You won't live long enough for it to matter. Elias frowned. That sounds like a threat. No, the warden said. It is a certainty. And with that, he turned and disappeared down the hall, leaving Elias alone again. Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Zyra stood before the High Chancellor. Her ceremonial robes had been stripped away, leaving her in a simple tunic. That marked her as an exile. Even so, she stood tall, refusing to bow. You should not be here, the High Chancellor said, his voice filled with quiet warning. Your fate is sealed. Zyra's three-fingered hands curled into fists. Let the human go. Silence. The elder's dark eyes studied her, unreadable. He knew the risks of his actions. He will face the consequences. You didn't have to attack him, Zyra said, stepping forward. He only made an offer. Why did that anger you so much? The High Chancellor's expression darkened. Because you are not just some discarded noble. Zyra froze. What? The Chancellor exhaled slowly. There is something you do not know, something that was kept from you, for your own protection. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. Tell me. The elder hesitated, then shook his head. It no longer matters. Your exile is final. Zyra stepped closer, her voice cold. If it no longer matters, then say it. Or do you fear what I might do with the truth? The Chancellor's gaze hardened. Then, he waved his hand. Zyra gasped as a sudden wave of energy surged into her mind, a vision. Images flashed before her eyes. A massive warship, hidden in deep space. A sealed chamber, pulsing with energy. An ancient force, awakening from the void. And herself, at the center of it all. The vision snapped away, leaving her gasping. Zyra staggered back, heart pounding. What was that? She whispered. The Chancellor's voice was grim. That is why you were rejected. Zyra's blood ran cold. Her exile wasn't about her disability. It wasn't about tradition. It was because she was dangerous. Back in the Citadel prison, Elias had spent years surviving in the unknown, but nothing had prepared him for what happened next. The walls of his cell hummed, vibrating with an unnatural energy. Something was coming. Then, the entire prison shook. An explosion ripped through the upper floors, sending dust and debris raining down. Alarms blared as guards shouted orders in their alien tongues. Elias snapped upright, instincts flaring. An attack? Who the hell would be crazy enough to assault a Dominion prison? Before he could finish that thought, the cell door exploded outward. Elias raised an arm to shield himself, but when he looked up, he froze. Standing in the shattered doorway was Zyra. But she wasn't alone. Two figures in sleek, black armor flanked her, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Zyra stepped forward, her violet eyes burning with something new, determination. You're coming with me, she said. Elias blinked. Huh. He tilted his head. You know, I was expecting to be rescued by literally anyone else. Zyra smirked. Disappointed? Elias rolled his shoulders. Not yet. But I have questions. Good, she said. So do I. The alarms screamed. Guards were coming. There was no time. Elias grinned. Well then, princess. Let's get the hell out of here. Zyra knows the truth about why she was exiled. Someone powerful doesn't want that truth to be revealed. Zyra has chosen to fight back, but now, the entire Dominion will be after them. Who are the figures helping her escape? And what ancient force is waking up in deep space? The Zenthra Citadel was in chaos. Alarms wailed through the halls, the walls trembled from explosions, and panicked voices filled the air. Elias Carter could feel the pulse of the battle before he even stepped into the corridor. Zyra stood before him, flanked by two armored figures, their weapons humming with restrained power. She had come for him. That alone told Elias everything had changed. "You're coming with me," she had said. And now, there was no turning back. Elias flexed his wrists as Zyra deactivated the phase cuffs binding him. His muscles screamed from being locked in place for too long, but he ignored the discomfort. "All right, princess," he muttered. "You got a plan, or are we making this up as we go?" One of the armored figures, a tall, sleek warrior with glowing crimson visors, tossed him a weapon. "We're getting out of here, that's the plan." Elias caught the pulse rifle, its weight comforting in his grip. He recognized the make, Carivian tech, top-tier mercenary gear. These weren't some backwater rebels. "Who the hell are you guys?" Elias asked. The second warrior, a shorter but heavily armored figure, spoke in a distorted voice. "We're the only chance you have to leave this place alive. Move." "Good enough." Zyra took point, leading them down the dimly lit corridor. The prison's emergency lights flickered in and out, casting eerie shadows along the walls. They weren't alone. Ahead, Dominion enforcers rushed into position, sleek exo-armored soldiers, their weapons already glowing with plasma energy. "Incoming!" Elias shouted. The fight began in an instant. Zyra moved like a shadow, her twin plasma blades cutting through the first enemy before they could fire. Sparks flew as metal clashed against energy fields. Elias dropped to one knee, firing precise bursts from his rifle. 2 guards went down instantly. The mercenaries flanked, their advanced kinetic shields absorbing incoming blasts. One of them, the taller one, lifted a pulse grenade and tossed it into the next group of soldiers. Boom! The explosion rocked the corridor, sending debris flying. Elias grinned. "I like these guys." Zyra turned to him. "Then you'll love what comes next. Move." They sprinted forward, stepping over fallen bodies. The exit was still far, but Elias could already feel the shift. This was no longer an escape. This was a war. Elsewhere, inside the Dominion War Council. Far above the prison, a dark chamber pulsed with energy. The High Chancellor stood before the Dominion's elite, a circle of figures hidden behind shadows and technology. "Zyra has escaped," the Chancellor said, his voice betraying none of the tension coiling inside him. "And she is not alone." The council remained silent. Then, a voice echoed from the shadows. "It has begun." The High Chancellor's hands clenched. "We cannot allow her to leave this planet. If she reaches the outer rim." "She won't," another voice cut in. This one was cold, sharp as a blade. "The Sentinel Hunters are already in motion." A hush fell over the chamber. Even the High Chancellor hesitated. The Sentinel Hunters were not soldiers. They were executioners. "She won't escape," the voice repeated. And with that, the hunt began. Back in the depths of the citadel, Elias could hear the battle rage across the prison. Explosions rocked the floors above, and distant screams echoed through the halls. They had to move fast. Zyra led them through a security door, motioning for the mercenaries to seal it behind them. "We're not just fighting prison guards anymore," she said. "The Dominion Council knows we're here. They'll send more than just foot soldiers." Elias nodded. "Great. So what's our way out?" "I don't see a front door anywhere." The shorter mercenary tapped a device on their wrist. A holographic map flashed to life, displaying the prison layout. "We're heading for the hangar bay. Our ship is prepped, but we need to get past 2 more security sectors." Elias smirked. "So all we have to do is fight our way through a heavily guarded, high-security Dominion launch bay, steal a ship, and escape an entire war fleet?" The mercenary looked at him. "Yes. Just wanted to make sure I had that right." Zyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. We don't have time to hesitate. They will send the hunters. Elias froze. The hunters? He had heard of them. Everyone had. The Sentinel hunters weren't just assassins. They were relentless, unstoppable, and bound to no laws. No one had ever escaped them. You're telling me they'll send a death squad after us? That's insane. Zyra's jaw tightened. We need to go. Now. Elias exhaled sharply. All right, princess. Lead the way. The first hunter arrives. Deep in the prison, a figure moved unseen. Clad in blackened Dominion war armor, the first Sentinel hunter emerged from the shadows. Their crimson visor pulsed as they scanned the surroundings, tracking movement. A guard stumbled backward, clutching his wounded side. They went that way. The prisoners, the traitor. The hunter raised one blade-like arm. The guard's eyes widened. Wait, A single, precise strike. The body fell. The hunter moved on, silent as death. Their target was close. And they never failed a hunt. The hangar bay, moments from escape. Elias and Zyra burst through the final security checkpoint, alarms screaming around them. The hangar bay stretched before them, a massive open space with rows of docked ships, Dominion fighters, and fuel tanks. Their ride out of here? A sleek black starship, already humming with energy. The mercenaries ran ahead, activating the ship's systems. Elias grinned. We might actually make it out of this alive. Then. The temperature dropped. A cold presence filled the room. Zyra froze. No. From the shadows, the first hunter stepped forward. Tall. Imposing. Clad in void-black armor, their visor burning red like a dying sun. Elias' pulse spiked. Princess, he muttered. Please tell me that's just another guard. Zyra's voice was ice. That's not a guard. She gripped her blades. That's a Sentinel hunter. Elias swore under his breath. Well, that's just fantastic. The hunter drew their weapon, a jagged plasma spear, humming with raw energy. Then, they moved. Faster than anything Elias had ever seen. 1 second, the hunter stood at the entrance. The next. They were already attacking. Next questions. Can Elias and Zyra escape the first hunter? Who are the mercenaries helping them? Why is Zyra so important to the Dominion's secrets? What ancient power is waking up? The Sentinel hunter stood motionless, its crimson visor glowing like a burning ember in the shadows. Every breath in the hangar seemed to freeze. Elias felt the weight of the moment. He had seen killers before. Mercenaries, bounty hunters, assassins. But this was different. This thing, this hunter, was something else. A force of nature. A ghost. A legend. Zyra's grip on her plasma blades tightened. Her stance shifted, body tensed like a coiled spring. Stay behind me, she muttered. Elias let out a dry chuckle. Not happening, princess. The first hunter moved. 1 second, it stood at the entrance. The next. It was already in front of them. Elias barely had time to react. Zyra twisted away, bringing up her blades just in time to block the hunter's strike. The force of the impact shook the ground beneath them. Sparks flew as plasma met metal, and Zyra gritted her teeth, pushing back. The mercenaries had just reached the ship when they turned and saw the battle unfolding. Get inside. Zyra shouted. The taller mercenary hesitated, then ran back, drawing their pulse cannon and firing. A bolt of energy streaked toward the hunter's back. But before it could land, the hunter vanished. Elias' heart slammed in his chest. No. Not vanished. Moved. Faster than the eye could follow, the hunter had shifted positions, reappearing behind the mercenary. A single strike. The mercenary barely had time to scream before their armor shattered, and their body collapsed. Elias cursed, gripping his rifle. This wasn't a fight. This was a massacre. Zyra didn't hesitate. She lunged at the hunter, her blades flashing in arcs of deadly precision. The hunter countered every strike. Elias fired, his shots aimed perfectly, but the hunter twisted and dodged like it could predict the future. The second mercenary shouted into their comms. "We need backup, now." But Elias knew. No backup was coming. Above the hangar, a dark presence watches. Far above the battle, deep in the void of space, a massive warship hung in the sky, silent as a tomb. Inside, the High Chancellor stood before a holographic display, watching the battle unfold. "The first hunter has engaged," a voice murmured. The Chancellor's cold eyes narrowed. "It won't be enough." A second voice, one of the Dominion Council's hidden overseers, spoke. "What do you suggest?" The Chancellor's lips curled. "Send the others." A pause. Then, the voice responded. "All of them?" "Yes," the Chancellor whispered. "No one leaves that planet alive." Back in the hangar, the last stand. Elias barely dodged as the hunter's spear sliced through the air, carving a deep gash in the floor. Zyra pressed the attack, her movements becoming more desperate, more brutal. But the hunter never wavered. Every block. Every counter. It was toying with her. Elias' stomach twisted. She was good, one of the best fighters he had ever seen. But against this thing? She wasn't going to win. He refused to let that happen. With a sharp breath, Elias vaulted over a supply crate, rolling behind the hunter. He fired point-blank, aiming directly for the weak points in its armor. The hunter shifted, twisting its body unnaturally. The shot grazed its shoulder, sparks flying. But it didn't even flinch. Instead, the hunter's free hand snapped up, grabbing Elias by the throat. Cold metal tightened. Elias' vision blurred as he felt his feet lift off the ground. The hunter tilted its head, studying him. Then it spoke. Unremarkable. The voice was distorted, inhuman. No emotion. No hatred. Just a cold statement. Elias choked, trying to break free. Zyra's scream tore through the hangar. "Let him go." The hunter's visor flickered. Then, for the first time, hesitated. Zyra lunged. Her blades flashed, striking at the hunter's exposed side. This time, the attack landed. The hunter's grip loosened just enough for Elias to drop. His lungs burned. But there was no time to recover. The ship's engines roared to life. The last mercenary had made it inside and was shouting from the cockpit. "Get in, now." Zyra grabbed Elias by the arm, dragging him toward the ramp. The hunter moved to intercept. But something unexpected happened. A second explosion rocked the hangar. The blast tore through the ceiling, sending fire and debris raining down. The hunter leaped back, momentarily thrown off balance. That was their opening. Zyra and Elias raced up the ramp, the ship's hatch sealing shut behind them. The mercenary hit the thrusters. And the ship launched into the sky. For a second, Elias thought they had escaped. But then the hunter moved. It threw its spear. The weapon pierced the ship's hull, embedding deep into the metal. An alarm blared. Critical damage detected. Zyra's eyes widened. "We're not going to make it." Elias coughed, trying to steady himself. "No, we are." She turned to him. "How do you?" Elias grabbed the controls. And punched in a set of coordinates. Zyra stared at the screen. Then, her face turned pale. "You're insane." Elias grinned through the pain. "Yeah. But it's our only shot." The ship's warp drive activated. A burst of white light engulfed them. And then they vanished. Far below, the first hunter watches. The flames of the destroyed hangar flickered in the hunter's visor. They had escaped. For now. The hunter lifted its wrist, activating a transmission. A deep, mechanical voice spoke from the other end. "Report." The hunter's response was simple. They ran. "I will follow." The transmission ended. The hunt wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Where did Elias send them? Can the ship survive the damage? Who is really hunting them, and why? What secrets does Zyra know that make her so dangerous? White light flooded the cockpit. The ship lurched violently as it tore through the fabric of space. Alarms screamed, sparks erupted from the controls, and the metal walls groaned under the pressure. Elias gritted his teeth, hands gripping the console as he fought to stabilize the ship. "Come on," he muttered. "Hold together." Zyra struggled beside him, her fingers flying over the navigation panel. This ship wasn't built for a blind jump. "Where the hell did you send us?" Elias didn't answer, not yet. The ship pitched sideways, spinning into the unknown, but then the engines cut. The blinding light vanished. And suddenly, they were drifting. Silence. The alarms dimmed, leaving only the soft hum of emergency power. Elias exhaled sharply. "We're here." Zyra's hands tightened on the console. "Where is here?" The main display flickered, revealing the dark void of space. No planets. No stars. Just blackness stretching endlessly in every direction. Zyra's breath caught. "No. No, no, no." She turned to Elias, eyes blazing. "You jumped us into the ghost expanse?" Elias leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yeah." Zyra shot to her feet. "You're out of your damn mind. Nobody survives here. This place swallows ships whole." Elias met her gaze, unfazed. "That's why I picked it." She stared at him. "You wanted to die here?" "No." Elias leaned forward, his voice steady. "I wanted to make sure that thing couldn't follow us." A heavy silence settled between them. Zyra ran a frustrated hand through her hair. "Even if we lost the hunter," she gestured at the empty abyss outside, "we're stuck in a place where physics stops making sense. No planets. No fuel stations. No way out." Elias didn't flinch. "We're not stuck," he said. "We just have to find it." Zyra narrowed her eyes. "Find what?" Elias turned back to the controls. "The Wraith Gate." Zyra's face went pale. "That's a myth." Elias smirked. "So was the Dominion super soldier program, until we saw that thing back there, tearing through our crew like paper." Zyra crossed her arms. "You expect me to believe you know where a hidden gate is? A portal out of here? Nobody has ever found it, asterisk asterisk. If it existed, someone would have mapped it by now, asterisk asterisk." Elias' expression darkened. "Someone did." Zyra froze. Elias pulled up a holomap and tapped a set of coordinates. A location buried deep inside the expanse. "My father found it," he said. "And he died trying to reach it." Meanwhile, on the Dominion warship. Far beyond the expanse, inside the Chancellor's flagship, a holographic projection of the first hunter flickered to life. The Chancellor stood motionless. "Report." The hunter's crimson visor gleamed. "They escaped into the ghost expanse." A murmur rippled through the shadowy figures gathered in the command chamber. The Chancellor's face remained unreadable. Then they are dead, one of the officers said. No ship returns from the expanse. The hunter was silent for a moment. Then, it spoke. I will retrieve them. Another murmur. The Chancellor's gaze flicked toward the darkened viewport. You believe you can track them? The hunter tilted its head slightly. Nothing escapes me. Back in the expanse, the ghost ship. Elias' fingers danced over the controls, scanning for any sign of the Wraith Gate. Zyra watched, arms crossed, but the doubt in her eyes was fading. Your father really found it? Elias nodded. He sent out a final transmission before he disappeared. A set of coordinates and 3 words, it's real. Run. Zyra's jaw tightened. Sounds like he didn't make it. Elias exhaled. No, but he got close. The scanner pinged. Zyra snapped to attention. What was that? Elias' eyes flicked to the screen. A weak signal. Something adrift. Zyra tapped a command, and the scanner zoomed in. The ship's floodlights illuminated the darkness. And there it was. A massive derelict ship, floating silently. Zyra's breath caught. That's not just any wreck. Elias' pulse quickened. It was his father's ship. The Perseus. Docking with the dead. The Perseus drifted lifelessly through the void. Zyra frowned at the readings. No power. No life signs. Elias clenched his jaw. Then I'll turn it back on. They docked, the airlock hissing as it connected. Elias and Zyra stepped inside, weapons drawn. The ship was a tomb. Dark corridors. Frozen bodies. Echoes of a final, violent battle. Elias pressed forward. He had been here before, in his nightmares. They reached the command deck. Zyra's fingers hovered over the controls. If your father left a message, it'll be in the ship's data core. Elias nodded, stepping toward the main terminal. He reached out, fingers trembling, and powered it on. The screen flickered to life. A distorted video log played. His father's face appeared, tired, bloodied. If you're watching this. I didn't make it. Elias swallowed hard. The message continued. The gate is real. I saw it. But it's guarded. Something hunts those who try to reach it. Zyra stiffened. Elias leaned closer. His father's voice dropped to a whisper. Don't try to fight it. You can't win. You have to trick it. Static filled the screen. Then. A final message. Find the beacon. It will lead you through. Elias' blood ran cold. Zyra turned to him. You said we lost the hunter back at the hangar. Elias nodded. Yeah. Zyra's voice was barely above a whisper. Then why is our ship's motion tracker picking something up, inside this wreck? Elias' heart stopped. A metallic clang echoed from the corridor. Something was already here. Zyra drew her blades, her eyes darting toward the darkened hallway. Elias' grip on his rifle tightened. The shadows shifted. Then. A single red visor ignited in the dark. The first hunter had found them. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. What did Elias' father mean by trick it? What guards the Wraith Gate? How did the first hunter track them? Can they escape the wreck before it's too late? The red visor burned in the darkness. Elias felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His grip tightened on his rifle. Zyra moved silently beside him, her twin daggers poised. The first hunter had found them. And this time, there was no running. The wrecked corridors of the Perseus stretched behind them, a labyrinth of shadows and death. The motion tracker on Zyra's wrist flickered wildly. One life sign. The hunter. It wasn't moving. It was watching. Waiting. Elias whispered, barely moving his lips. It wants us to run. Zyra barely nodded. So we don't. Silence. Then. A metallic shift. The hunter took one step forward. Elias' fingers twitched on the trigger. On my mark. The hunter vanished. The shadows swallowed it whole. Zyra swore. Where? A sharp clank sounded behind them. Zyra spun, too late. The hunter struck. A blur of motion, Elias dove, pulling Zyra down. A blade sliced through the air, missing them by inches. The impact rattled the walls. Sparks flew. The hunter didn't miss. But this time, Elias had expected it. Boom! He fired point-blank into the hunter's chest. The shot landed. The hunter staggered back, armor scorched. Zyra leapt forward, spinning like a blade herself, her daggers flashing. She struck fast, 1, 2, 3 times. The hunter blocked the first, dodged the second, but the third. A deep cut across its shoulder. It didn't bleed. It didn't flinch. It only turned its head, visor burning brighter. And then, it moved. Faster than anything should. Zyra was sent flying. Her body slammed into the wall. A sharp crack, Elias didn't know if it was the metal or her bones. The hunter turned back to Elias. A whisper, distorted and inhuman. You are not your father. Elias gritted his teeth. No, he raised his rifle again. I'm worse. Boom. 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 3 shots. The hunter dodged the first. The second grazed its side. The third. Straight to the visor. The hunter jerked back. Its head snapped to the side, the red glow flickering. That was their chance. Elias grabbed Zyra, pulling her up. Move. She shook off the pain and ran. They raced through the dead ship, weaving through ruined corridors. Behind them, metal groaned as the hunter rose again. It was coming. And it was angry. The beacon's secret. They reached the command deck. Zyra stumbled but caught herself. That won't stop it for long. Elias was already moving, digging through the ship's main controls. His father's last words burned in his mind. Find the beacon. It will lead you through. Zyra checked the motion tracker. The hunter was coming. Fast. She spun back to Elias. Whatever you're looking for, find it now. Elias' fingers flew over the console. Then, there. A small metal panel. Hidden beneath layers of dust. He yanked it open. Inside. A beacon. It wasn't broadcasting. It was locked. Elias grabbed it, his breath sharp. This is it. Zyra pulled her blaster. Then let's go. Too late. The hunter was already here. The air grew thick. The temperature dropped. Elias turned just as the hunter stepped into the light. Its visor still cracked. Its voice, a whisper of death. There is no escape. Elias locked eyes with Zyra. No, he muttered. Not escape. A trap. He slammed the beacon against the console. Click. A hum filled the air. The ship shook. A voice, his father's voice, echoed through the room. Gate activated. Zyra's eyes widened. Elias turned back to the hunter. You're not the only one who can set a trap. Light exploded from the console. A pulse wave. It slammed into the hunter. The hunter froze. The shadows around it cracked, like glass. For the first time, the hunter staggered. Elias grabbed Zyra's hand. Run! They sprinted toward the docking bay. Behind them, the hunter snarled, a sound that was almost human. The ship trembled. The beacon's light tore through the darkness of the expanse. And then, a rift opened. The Wraith Gate. A swirling vortex of energy burst into existence just beyond the ship. Zyra gasped. You did it. Elias didn't stop running. We're not done yet. They vaulted into their ship. Zyra fired the engines. Hold on. The ship launched forward. The gate loomed ahead. Behind them. The hunter rose. Its armor cracked. Its visor burned brighter. And then. It lunged. Elias' heart stopped. The hunter was coming with them. He grabbed the ship's manual override, and spun the ship around. Zyra shouted. What the hell are you doing? Elias only had one shot. He fired everything. Missiles. Cannons. A full blast. Straight into the Wraith Gate. The moment the hunter was inside. The gate collapsed. Boom. A shockwave ripped through space. The expanse swallowed itself. Then. Silence. The hunter was gone. And so was the expanse. They were somewhere new. Somewhere far beyond the Dominion's reach. Zyra slumped back in her seat. Tell me that worked. Elias exhaled. It worked. They weren't safe. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time. They weren't running anymore. They had won. For now. The end. Or the beginning. Elias and Zyra survived. But the Dominion is still out there. The first hunter isn't gone forever. And somewhere, deep in the unknown, a new war is waiting.